Hello, it's 10 a.m. on Tuesday, October 4th, here in Seoul. You're tuned in to our mid-morning edition of ARIRANG News. I'm Mark Broom. Let's start at the National Assembly. The parliamentary audit schedule is back on track this Tuesday. After the ruling Senator Party withdrew its boycott and the rival parties agreed to extend the period of the audit session. On the first day back since the long holiday weekend, rival party lawmakers are expected to focus on allegations surrounding the establishment of the Mira and K Sports Foundations. There are serious questions over how the two organizations raised a staggering $65 million between them through donations by private companies. The parties have agreed to push back the audit's closing date from October 15th to the 19th to make up for the loss of time caused by the ruling party's boycott last week. But bipartisan tension remains as the ruling party is pushing for a legal revision to reinforce the Assembly Speaker's political neutrality, a move the main opposition party deeply opposes. Korea's southern resort island of Jeju is forecast to come under the indirect effect of Typhoon Chaba in the coming hours. There's a 60 to 80% chance of heavy rain this afternoon on Jeju and in other southern regions. Some mountainous parts of Jeju Island are expected to see up to 250 millimeters of rain, but most areas will see between 50 to 150. Gangwon-do and Chungcheongbuk-do provinces are forecast to see between 20 to 60 millimeters of rain. The indirect influence of the typhoon will also bring strong and gusty winds to those areas, so take care if you have to drive. Now, in economic news, Korea posted a current account surplus of slightly over $5.5 billion in August, continuing its surplus streak for a record 54th month. The Bank of Korea says the seasonally adjusted surplus was the lowest figure in 4 months, down more than $3 billion from the surplus posted in the same month last year. The central bank attributes the relatively low surplus in August to the slowing increase in the pace of exports. Outbound shipments in August rose 2.6% on year, just topping $40 billion. Imports edged up 0.7% to around $35 billion. The deficit in the service balance, which includes tourism and shipping, narrowed slightly in August from the month before. Now, with an ongoing strike by the rail and subway labour unions, subway train services in Seoul and its surrounding areas are expected to dip slightly below usual levels from today. The country's rail operator KORail says operations on subway lines 1, 3 and 4 will drop to as low as 80% of normal levels during afternoon hours. Subway trains on those lines will run at 92% of usual levels during the evening rush hours. A KORail spokesman said the drop in services is due to a lack of substitute workers. Regular passenger trains will run at 60%, freight trains just 42%. However, Korea's KTX bullet train will operate as normal without any disruptions. The government's sharp price hike on cigarettes has taken a big bite out of cigarette sales at convenience stores, driving smokers to duty-free shops instead. Data from the Korea Customs Service shows over 200 million packs were sold at the nation's duty-free stores last year, a more than 43% increase compared to the year before. The government announced last month that total cigarette sales in 2015 dropped almost 24% from the year before, but that figure excludes sales at duty-free stores. Duty-free cigarette sales have been on the up ever since the government announced in 2014 that it would slap an extra $1.80 in tax on each pack, bringing the price to around $4 a pack. The lawmaker who submitted the data to the National Assembly urged the government to consider lowering the tax to stop smokers sidestepping it by buying duty-free. Now, in a worrying deterioration of relations, the United States has suspended talks with Russia on its efforts to end the violence in Syria. It suggests there's little hope for a diplomatic solution to the end of the more than 5-year civil war anytime soon. Kim Myo-kyun with the details.
The U.S. State Department says Washington is halting its participation in bilateral channels with Russia as Moscow did not live up to its commitments.
The United States spared no effort in negotiating and attempting to implement an arrangement with Russia aimed at reducing violence, providing unhindered humanitarian access, and degrading terrorist organizations operating in Syria, including Daesh and al-Qaeda in Syria. Unfortunately, Russia failed to live up to its own commitments, including its obligations under international humanitarian law and UN SCR 2254.
The announcement came as Syrian government forces supported by Iranian-backed militias and Russian air power pounded the rebel-held area of Aleppo. U.S. State Department spokesman John Kirby said Washington would continue to communicate with Moscow's military to avoid accidental military interactions over Syria. But he said the U.S. would withdraw all personnel it had dispatched to prepare for military cooperation with Russia under the latest ceasefire agreement. A few hours before the announcement, Russian President Vladimir Putin suspended an agreement with the U.S. on disposing of weapons-grade plutonium, citing Washington's, quote, unfriendly actions towards Moscow. Washington said it was disingenuous of Russia to cite the United States' threat to strategic stability as a reason for this decision. Kim Mo-gyan, ARIRANG News.
Well, that's all we have for now. Do have a great rest of the day, and we'll be back with more news at noon Korea time. So until then, goodbye.